thank you to our sponsors, Little Voices. Are you a teacher with a passion for drama, music and performance, or feeling stuck in the classroom? Little Voices gives you the chance to step into a role where you can truly inspire young minds through the arts. This is a company I know well and admire. They're passionate about child development, highly rated and genuine and transformative. With small group teaching, a focus on confidence and creativity, with the opportunity to guide children through Lambda qualifications, you can make a real impact. Plus, with the support of a nationwide franchise network behind you, you can run your own successful business, doing what you love while teaching in a way that truly fits your life. Hello, and welcome to the Pit Pony podcast with myself, Sharon Corley,
and me, Sarah Dunwood,
in which we talk to teachers from all walks of life who exited the classroom from what they thought was a job for life and thrived on the other side of teaching. Coming up in this episode...
So I then started teaching again in the January, having buried this trauma. Was that the best thing to do? Probably not. But hey ho, I was making this up as I went along. I didn't know what I was doing. It just felt like the right thing to do. Go back in the classroom. I've got this shock, this trauma that I don't know how to deal with, but I feel like I'm ready to teach again.
Hello listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Pit Pony podcast. We have a lovely guest with us today, Gareth Dale. Gareth and I have spoken at great length before this recording, and I am personally very honoured to sit and listen to his story today. So Gareth's mum was a teacher, his inspiration, and he, primary, Key Stage 2, taught from 2005 to 2023, and loved it, born to teach, our typical pit pony. But Gareth is no longer a teacher. Gareth left the classroom, and relatively recently, to be fair. So Gareth, before we roll our sleeves up and get into your story, tell us what it is you are doing today.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. It's a great privilege to talk to a pair of you. And my name is Gareth Dale, and I am a children's author who does visits in school, and I also run my own private tuition business.
Brilliant. So we've got lots to unpick at the other end. So Gareth, yours is a deeply personal story. It is also a story that you probably have told in parts, but not from start to finish before. So first and foremost, thank you. Because I know many of our pit ponies find it very difficult to go back over certain points in their life and do it in one hit. So this is very much today about holding space for you. Okay? This is about your narrative and your story. So with that in mind, Gareth, start us where you feel most comfortable and tell us the story of Gareth Dale.
I think it's probably best to start at the very beginning of my teaching career. And my NQT year, as it was back then, began in September 2005. And it was at an inner city school where it was a real baptism of fire in behaviour management and in relationship building with children. Because if you didn't have a strong relationship with these children, if you were not their safe place, then you would struggle in these schools. And it was like doing a 3-year specialism in behaviour management. This then gave me skills for my entire career, my entire life, and I still call upon them today. So I am very grateful for my 3 years at the inner city school. However, I had to leave at the end of 3 years because that school got amalgamated into lots of other smaller inner city schools because the council just said, right, too many small schools, let's put them all together in one. And so had no choice but to leave for pastures new. And so I decided to go on supply and take these skills that I'd learnt and put them into practice the world over being Nottingham, Derby and Leicester. So, yeah, I went off into the teaching world armed with 3 years of behaviour management experience. And, yeah.
You've done your 3 years, you tooled up, so you move. What's the next chapter?
Well, I did 1 full year of supply, and I learned so much by going in and seeing different schools, how they were run, the different ways of interacting with pupils, different ways of doing displays, and how different year groups operate. And then at the start of my 2nd year of supply, I went into a school and I had a morning in year 3, I think it was, and an afternoon in year 1. And on the way out, the lady on reception said to me, "Our head teacher wants a word with you." And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? It was terrible. And the head teacher called me in. And fortunately, it wasn't that. She said to me, "Our year 4 teacher's leaving. Would you like to take them on?" And I thought, first of all, who leaves at October half term? Nobody leaves at October half term unless they're going on maternity, or I didn't know why she was leaving. But then the head teacher said, no, this class, they need a strong teacher. They need someone to come in and really put them in shape. Okay. So I said, yeah, well, I'll try it. I'll take all these skills that I've got over the last few years, try and put them into practice. And yeah, when I got in there, these kids were they were off the wall, quite literally. And I'm not ashamed to admit, after my first day there, I went home and I cried because it was so tough. And then I faced my first choice because I sat down that evening, got over the tears and went, right, I either go back in and try it or I walk away because I was just supply teacher. Or if I wanted to just go, no thanks, not for me anymore. And one of the best decisions I ever made was going back in for that second day.
Lovely.
Because the children, they looked at me as if to say, oh, we weren't expecting you to come back. We thought we'd seen you off yesterday. And that was, once I'd got those children on side, that was one of the best experiences I'd ever had. Because those children, once they were in shape, they were phenomenal.
Perfect.
Brilliant year. However, towards the end of that year, I then started thinking, I think I might be ready for a proper, in inverted commas, job again. Now, after the heartbreak of having my first school closed down and then building confidence up and applying skills, I thought, yeah, I think I need to go into a school regularly. But that school for me was too much of a commute. It was too far to drive to, so I didn't want a job at that school. So I shopped around and then I got a job teaching year 3 and 4 about 2 miles from home. And yeah, I loved my work. It was glorious. I got married while I was at that school, and there were a lot of things that happened in my life whilst at this school. I went through the threshold because I had it in my head that I was going to do all of it. I remember saying to the head teacher that was there, one day when I'm running my own school, I'm going to do it like this, and this. The world was at my feet. I could do whatever I wanted to do. I've made friends for life there. I still talk to them to this day. And this is going back some 15 years now. It was wonderful, my time at this school. We got pregnant at the start of 2013. And that's where everything looked rosy. Everything looked fine. But there were lots of niggles in the back of my mind about, but as you would think, when it's one thing to just have your career, when somebody then says, right, you're going to have a baby, your priorities start to get a bit mished and mashed all over the place. So that was scary in and of itself, but life was still looking good. The baby was due in October and we moved house, but we stayed local because you know what it's like, can't live with it. It's one thing to bring up a baby in a 2 up, 2 down. We wanted something bigger, so we then moved. And I was happy at work, but it was certainly taking a back seat as preparation for parenthood started to get more and more prominent. In the October of 2013, though, Clara was born, and after it was as near a full term of pregnancy as you could have hoped for. But then, without wanting to divulge too much information, too many specifics, she then died 2 days later. And died peacefully with family around her. Nobody was to blame. It was just something that happened.
Wow.
And that's when life and my world got flipped completely.
Okay, so let's take a minute and thank you. First and foremost, thank you for sharing that. It's not going to be an easy episode by any stretch of the imagination. But I think what's important at this stage is when a school is right, it's right. The vibrancy with which you talked about that period, friends for life. I knew where I wanted to be. We've had pit ponies, haven't we, Sarah, where school has been such benefit to their life. It enhances their life. And it's important to remember that's what many people's schools experiences are if things are going well. Thought,
Yeah.
Sarah? Yeah.
I mean, it's so much of that description of certainly two out of the schools that I worked at. That was my experience. It was friends for life, people. Sharon and I have talked about this. I not so long ago, actually, I think, about the fact that up until coming out of teaching, my entire social life friendship group pretty much revolved around wherever I was working. And that was okay. There was nothing wrong with that. I had other friends, but that's okay. And I think sometimes we look at it and go, is that right? Is that okay that everything kind of revolves around this building and this community? And yeah, it does. If it works for you at that point in time, yeah, it does. It's fine. So I completely recognize that. But I do think it is, Sharon's absolutely right. It's conditional. It's on the condition that everything's all right.
Yeah.
Because the minute it starts to not be all right, that's where it
really, really gets tested.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've just brought us, Gareth, to something that really wasn't all right. You know, sadly, you lost your daughter. And I know that you are going to walk us through all of that. So you lose Clara.
Yeah. Looking back now, 11 and a half, 12 years later, the first thing that hit, it wasn't grief. At the time, I thought, wow, this is what grief feels like. But looking back, it wasn't grief, it was shock. And I say shock because things like babies dying, you don't hear about that nowadays. You hear about it Victorian times, yes, but I had no clue before that happened that babies still died in this day and age. It was a complete shock. And there was this strange sensation that didn't allow for grief because it was such a shock that I didn't know where to start. How do you process the loss of something that you never knew? You can only grieve for what is now an imaginary future. It's an imaginary life that you're never going to have. The life you lived and shared it's robbed you of that. There's literally an infinite number of possibilities that were taken away.
It's challenging, Gareth. A family member lost their child very, very young. And exactly what you've just talked about there. It's how do you grieve for something that you haven't experienced, but you know you were going to experience? It makes the grieving process so much more difficult. So I completely get that.
It's a grief that very, very few people have experienced or can begin to comprehend, because a lot of grief is filled with experiences and memories and looking back on good times. There was none. To have your child taken away when they're 2 days old, what on earth? How do you begin to process the mourning, the grief? If you lose a parent, someone in your network has also lost a parent. You've got someone that you can go to. Please don't think I'm belittling the loss of a parent. I'm really not. But I'm just saying it's completely different. You can find somebody else that's lost a parent. You can talk about it. You can share experiences of it. It's the same with a sibling or partner. There's somebody else out there that you know, and you can go to them and say, I've had this experience, you've had this experience. Can we share?
You have a lifetime as well of things to refer back to. You have memories and smells and voices and occasions and magical moments. And the word you keep using is different. None is more acute than the other. But this is one that's, to me, an unusual space to sit in because it's almost projected grief, the projection rather than the nostalgia, the looking back, the loss. It's a different type of loss. You've lost a future, very acutely lost a future. And please forgive me, I'm only trying to step into the shoes of this. I should imagine it potentially sits in the world of the miscarriage and the stillborn child. You had 2 days with Clara and a lifetime of what ifs and what could have beens.
It was also the first time that I'd lost someone. This was my first experience of grief because I'd still got both my parents. I've got the grandparents that I'd known. But my first experience of losing someone was this. And since then, I've experienced grief because I've lost both my grandparents since then. And now I've experienced grief. I now know it wasn't that. This was shock because you didn't know how to comprehend it. It was just taking it back to school for a second. I remember having to make the phone call to my head teacher to say, baby's been born, but really not very well. And then the teacher in me kicked in and then went, but can you please sort Star of the Week out? Because there'd been a mix-up the week before. The wrong child had been given it. So it was being a teacher was still there. Even while we're sat in the hospital, the teacher in me was still there. Which just looking back on it, I think is either insane or amazing. I can't decide which one it is.
It doesn't have to be one or the other. We've had hip pony anecdotes, and Sarah will talk about this herself, in an ambulance, marking, worrying, thinking who's going to do my lessons. It's something that comes within us. It's inexplicable in some ways, but it feels the most natural thing in the world to be doing. You're making a phone call and you're thinking of something so innocuous like Star of the Week.
Yeah.
But I think that goes back to who we are and why we are so special in our career. To be thinking along those lines, it's not unusual, it's completely natural, but it's those two things. It's either insane or the best of us. So yeah, completely resonate with that, Gareth.
I had 4 weeks off work while we waited for finding out inquest results to see if there was anybody at fault. There was not, categorically. No one was at fault for this. It was just something that happened. I then waited for the funeral to take place, and the funeral was on Thursday, and then I went back to school on the Monday. I could have gone back earlier, but I wanted funeral done, dusted. Right, that's happened. Let's get back to work, because I wanted to be there. It was a safe place. Nothing had changed at work. Nothing had changed at school. It was a safe place to be. But those 4 weeks I was off, I can't remember them. I remember going for walks, and I think I went to my in-laws a couple of times, but I can't remember those weeks.
You've said shock. I'm going to throw another word in: trauma.
Yeah.
It was utterly traumatic, and shock is a symptom and a byproduct of the state you were in. But what you had gone through was deeply, deeply traumatic, which is why you will have some form of amnesia, a black spot in your memory, because that's trauma.
I remember the day I went back was the 11th of November, and I texted my best friend at the school the night before, and I said, "Don't you dare be nice to me when I come back. Don't you dare come and hug me, because that is not what me and you do. Just come up to me, insult me like you would do normally, and let's just crack on." But I remember it vividly being the 11th of November, because they had the 2-minute silence in the hall, and I'd kind of gone in, shut myself in the PPA room just to say I was at work and I was keeping busy. What I was doing in the PPA room, no idea. It must have been random odd jobs for the head teacher, but I was in the building. And they said to me, "Would you like to go in for the 2-minute silence?" And no, I wouldn't. I just wanted to stay in that room. I wanted to say I was in the school, I was at work, and I was keeping myself busy. Yeah, like I say, I wanted to be there because it was normal, and that's what I needed. I'd seen my class, I'd stuck my head in the door, and they'd seen me, but there was no way I could teach them. I remember having a chat with the head teacher. I remember saying to her, "I don't care as much as I should. As long as the children in that class are safe and they are happy and they are learning, I don't care. I'm going through too much here." Hypothetically, if you were to say to me, and she really didn't, if you were to say to me, "Can we have a pupil progress meeting?" But no, I don't care enough. You can try and talk to me about that, but I'm not going to. And she was brilliant about it. So I needed a job to do in and around school, because 11th of November, it was a long run to Christmas like it is every year. So I needed something to do, because I wasn't ready to teach. I wasn't ready to be in and around a class in a formal environment like that, because if something was to go wrong, then I don't know how upsetting that would have been for me.
Yeah, you're fragile. You're fragile. You've gone in, you've spoken to your head teacher. They've heard you, they've seen you, they've listened to you. You're using school as your safe space, but you know you're not emotionally safe enough to be fully present and acting. So school's held a good space for you here. And I know that you're grateful for that, and your honesty with the school, I think, is really important, because very often we sometimes play guess what's in our head. We come in and we say, "Please laugh and joke with me. I just want to get back. I just want to get back to normal." And then the minute they do normal, they're unthinking, they're uncaring. You were honest, you were open, and you were overt. You set your own stall out. So even though you were in shock and you were in trauma, you had, I think, good survival instincts to know what you were and were not capable of, and felt safe enough to say that within that environment. So that's really heartening, Gareth.
So, like I say, I needed a job to do, because there was only so many admin tasks that they could have me doing. So I then sat there and wrote the Christmas performance. We didn't buy one off the internet. I wrote one. And I said, "Please, can you let me do this? Please, can I get a handful of year sixes and put this performance on?" And that play, that performance, that pantomime, it changed my life. It gave me a purpose. It was the most brilliant performance, a brilliant play we've ever done. The year sixes were amazing. And yet that long run to Christmas it wasn't as scary or as hard as it could well have been because I had a purpose. My closest family members all came to watch it, to see what I'd done, and they had a great time. They said it was amazing. And yeah, like I say, that performance, it changed and arguably it saved my career, changed my life, however you want to look at it. It had a positive impact on me. However, that only got me to Christmas, because then on the drive home after the last day before Christmas, that was when something else hit me. And I just completely broke down on that drive home. The thought of what was just a couple of weeks without a purpose, having just had one for the last 6 weeks, that was too much. And then factor in it was Christmas and everyone should be happy and jolly. It's Christmas time. Like, no. My daughter died 2 months ago. I don't want to be happy and jolly for Christmas. Now, this isn't school related. This was just what was going on in my head. I'd had the dreams of what could have been. I had that feeling of waking up and then forgetting what had happened. And then that split second later going, oh yeah, that happened. Got to keep processing this. So there's little few seconds where you get your heart broken all over again. They'd really stepped up a gear as I'd driven home for Christmas. And again, I've got no memory of those 2 weeks over Christmas, because I think, like you said, Sharon, trauma. I can't remember. I can remember Christmas Day. I remember it being, but I don't really have any memory of those 2 weeks again. Whether it's filed somewhere at the back, I don't know. But I have no memory. It was like living in a haze or living in a fog, and I just can't remember it. But on the 1st of January, something clicked. There was something about being able to say it was last year. I don't know what the psychology is of that. I don't know if there's science to it or what, but the 1st of January and being able to say it was last year, it changed me. And I don't know why, but it did. There was that jolt of grief over Christmas had been replaced with want to get pregnant again.
Okay, so you're entering into the new year with an optimism, with a different mindset to a certain extent. You don't need to understand why.
It's optimism, whether it was sticking a plaster over a wound. Because although it wasn't like 31st of December, I was massively unhappy. 1st of December, everything's okay again.
Yeah.
It wasn't that extreme, but there was something about being able to say last year.
Yes.
Whether it was a deep-seated new year, new start, but I was far from okay at this point. It wasn't life is all rosy now.
Sarah, what do you think?
I don't think it's uncommon for it's take to a different scenario of grief. The first of each thing after you lose somebody is difficult. And I think probably for you guys, and I'm projecting and I don't know, but Christmas would have been the first Christmas, I would guess, and you got through it.
So I spent the whole of 2013 building up to this Christmas. Yeah. First one with a baby. Once got through that Christmas, perhaps my new purpose is becoming pregnant and becoming a dad again.
I think there's a lot of things here where it's possible to be in two states at once, isn't it? You're absolutely right. You weren't right. You weren't right. You don't just flick a switch at midnight on the 31st of December and everything's okay. But I suspect it's a new year, therefore it was last year. was part of a coping mechanism that you didn't realize was a coping mechanism. And it's not uncommon when we talked, again, different contexts, when you talk to pit ponies, it happened for me. Once I got 12 months past having been out of the school, so everything was over a year ago, that's when I started to heal. So very different circumstances, but I think that thing of it being in a different year, it being over 12 months ago, I think is a psychological thing. I don't know what it is, but I think it is.
So I then started teaching again in the January, having buried this trauma. And was that the best thing to do? Probably not. But hey ho, I was making this up as I went along. I didn't know what I was doing. It just felt like the right thing to do. Go back in the classroom. I've got this shock, this trauma that I don't know how to deal with, but I feel like I'm ready to teach again. I've got this fizzing feeling, it was like a sense of being lost, but I was looking at the world very differently now. As I'm sure anyone that's lost anyone, you do see the world in completely different ways afterwards. I still don't know what I should have done with this. And even if I was to talk to myself from that time, I wouldn't know what to say to him. But we got pregnant again in March. But I also decided that because of I had a meltdown in this classroom, I spent the first day back in the PPA room. All around my school were flashes of this happened in that room. You did this in that room. I needed something else. Because there were too many reminders in that school of a hard time.
Brief interlude, dear listener. Couple of questions. Are you a tutor or even a pit pony considering tutoring? And do you fancy getting in the room with myself and Sarah Dunwood learning about the wonderful world of tuition? Then why not join us at the National Tutors Conference hosted by Connexus Tuition on the 29th of July 2025. It's at Chesford Grange, Kenilworth. Links to the tickets are in the show notes below, and we will both see you on the other side. So interestingly, it's gone from that womb-like safe place to now it's served that purpose. Now it's becoming painful to stay in that space. That was the classroom where I've looked out of that window and thought, 3 more weeks and it's the due date. Kids' faces who've been asking you, sir, have you thought of any names yet? Do you want a boy or a girl? Then it becomes the space you run back to where they've kept you safe. But now with this shift, with this new start, this renaissance, so to speak, you have to exit that for no other reason other than that. It's now triggering. It's now not feeling the way it used to feel.
That's exactly it. It was no negativity whatsoever towards people or school. It was, I need to get out of this place. When we got pregnant again in the March, that was when I moved on to the next stage of grief, trauma, shock, whatever label we're going to assign to it. That's when the panic and the worry hit. When we got pregnant again, it was a few seconds of relief and elation, but then was suddenly replaced with, you're going to go through it again.
Now you've gone from this time round, might have been a bit naive the first time round, thinking it was going to be happy ever after. I'm naturally leaning towards catastrophization now. This is now, I know what can go wrong. It has gone wrong. So I should imagine at every antenatal appointment, every milestone, every single, is this happening? So you've sat in a place of anxiety that you hadn't experienced with Clara's pregnancy. Interesting.
Yeah. The only word that I can sum up those 40 weeks of my life was worry. It was 9-10 months of just pure worry. There was still the shock, but that was now outweighed by this sense of foreboding. I can't begin to describe it. Every step of that pregnancy was monitored so carefully, but it felt like every dream I wanted to have and did have came with a little asterisk saying, yeah, but it was impossible to get excited without that voice. Because when you've lost what was lost and then you're offered the same thing again, it's hard to trust the universe.
Wow. That really hit me. You know, when you're trusting the same, it's a replica. It's a replica. And this time I know what the end of the world can feel like because I've just gone through it. And now I'm back on that journey again. Wow. So where are you now at this point?
This was transitioning from one job to new job. And still in shock, still with worry, but teaching the children, despite this sense of fright, dread, and unease, becoming that Mr. Dale character, it allowed me to escape just for a while. All was well when I was with my class. I couldn't bring myself to tell them that I was having a baby, but I just shut my eyes, aimed for December and the due date, and just escaped into being the teacher persona. Because we've all got the teacher character that we put on, and then the person that you are behind closed doors when the children aren't around. I lived for being that teacher character because it was 6 hours with a group of children having fun and teaching where all was right with the universe. So I'd gone from my previous job, really can't cope with anything going wrong with kids, to then relying on that situation.
No, that's such personal insight as well, isn't it? And many of our pit ponies talk about when I'm in the classroom, when that door is shut, that is my safe space because it hadn't gone wrong in the classroom. You hadn't experienced trauma or overt criticism or any of those things. There was an area in your life that was known, familiar, comfortable, and you could trust. I think that's what it was about. You could trust yourself. You could trust the circumstances. There were so many unknowns with this pregnancy that how could you trust? How could you? So that makes absolute sense. And I'm sure many of our listeners will resonate with that on varying levels. My marriage has collapsed, but I know I'm safe in the classroom. I've lost my parents, but I know because it's still a safe space. And we go back to where we were at the start, when it's good. When it's good.
Had I got my eyes open properly, then I might have been able to see that the stresses of school, but not the teaching side of it, they weren't good. This is no fault of anybody, but the stresses that a teaching job brings, they are not good for someone in a situation like that. Like, I could handle putting the act on for the children. I loved putting the act on for the children. I relied on putting the act on for the children. But when they'd gone and it was just adults left, be it staff members at school or family members at home, be it my parents, my brother, whoever, I just wanted to curl up. It's not that anyone had done anything wrong. It's just putting all your energy into either worrying about a pregnancy or putting an act on for the children. I had nothing left to give. It was all based in fright, and it just wasn't wasn't worth it for the adults. But I kind of longed for the adults to see and understand, no, we get it. We can see what you're doing. And they did. All my mental energy was focused on willing that baby to be okay. And it was just exhausting. There were times when it got too much. And so I sought counsel with people inside and outside of education. And every chat I had was beginning to make it clearer that the education system, from a professional's point of view, is not designed to help staff members that are going through something like that. It's got an expectation on you that very few other jobs do. There are others, of course there are, but not many.
I think in some respects it's because there's no flex because of the way we still teach, because you've got to be in a room from a certain time. You can't leave that room until 3:10. They can't suddenly say, okay, let's look at a hybrid working model for you here. Let's factor in some counselling. There isn't the corporate approach that you get in that respect, because we are still teaching very much in a straitjacketed kind of way. I mean, Sarah, we've spoken with many pit ponies who have gone into the corporate world, who've gone into civil service, who've gone into other jobs. They're better set up to support. There comes a point where there almost is a cut-off, right? Crack back on with everything the way it was before.
I think the fundamental issue with teaching is that it centres around groups of children. And there is a perception that once you've got your class, and Gareth, you were primary, I was second, Sharon and I were secondary, excuse me. If you're the sole teacher of a subject in secondary, which is what I was quite often, well, who else, if you're not in, who else takes those children? It's around a cluster of children. If you're a nurse or a doctor or a firefighter or a police officer, you haven't got a daily set of clients that are perceived to be fundamentally reliant on you. And I think that's the challenge with teaching. You go out into the private sector, and yes, somebody might have a whole portfolio of clients that they deal with, but if they're off, if they can't do that job, somebody else will come in and quickly get to know those clients and pick them up and take them on. There's a real distinct, it's to do with the fact it's rooted around that class.
And actually, a good business ensures that they're never dependent with one member of staff, with a client base, or with a group of people, or with a series of tasks. A savvy business owner or somebody managing projects will make sure fundamentally that nobody is irreplaceable at the drop of a hat, because you've got other team members who can pick up certain things. There's training in different ways. But when you are that teacher, it's exactly what Sarah's just said. Everything rises and falls on you being in front of those 30 children from a certain time, certain weeks of the year. So there's no flex, because when they're off, you're off. Times of the day, there's only you who knows those children. There's only you who can do those reports. There's only you who can mark those books. I've advocated for so long, we shouldn't do that in primaries. We should have multiple teachers teaching multiple aspects of that class. Someone delivers the literacy, someone delivers the numeracy, someone does other elements of it. And that way you would have had the flex. But you find yourself back in that classroom. In the first instance, you've said, if I'm hearing correctly, it was my saving grace doing the performance, but the performance is only one element. With that performance, when that performance ends, yes, you're not getting potentially what you need from the other adults, but there's also a whole host of stuff to do with that class that don't rely on input performance, like the marking of books, like the lesson preparation, like the parents' evenings. That's the bit that still sits with being that teacher.
Yeah, there's the metaphor about the cup of cares to give. And I was using all my cares of myself, my wife, and my unborn baby. I just couldn't bring myself to care outside of those 6 hours. I couldn't care about anyone or anything else. So if asked to do staff meeting, I can't. I can't bring myself to. And this is no reflection on anyone at school. It wasn't that. It was just where my head was. I probably came across as withdrawn or unhappy, but that wasn't how I felt. I was just petrified. How could I change that? I don't know what to advise myself. I don't know what I'd give. I don't know what I would have done differently. It was just, it was 9 months of long, hard worry.
Very, very honest. Very honest. So you've had your 9 months of worry. You're very, very open. I haven't got the bandwidth within me to really, and I think the word you're using is care. I can't manufacture what you need me to do because I'm spent.
Yeah.
I'm spent. Okay.
I could care for the children and I could care being Mr. Dale, being that character. But as soon as 3:20 hit, that was it. I would shut down. However, my daughter was then born in slightly dramatic circumstances, but nothing life-threatening. In mid-December of 2014, she was a perfectly healthy baby girl. However, once the adrenaline of the birth had worn off for me, that's when what I recognize and what I identify as grief probably kicked in. It was probably when school finished for Christmas, because she was born on the 15th. School would have finished a week or two later. I took my paternity leave in the first 2 weeks after Christmas. And that, to me, is when I started feeling grief. Because I look at myself and photos of myself, over that Christmas, and I look dreadful.
So this idea of relief, the 9 months of worry is over. No, the universe didn't plan that as a route. Actually, now I'm showing you what you could have had.
Yeah, because the change in your life when you have a baby is massive. Of course it is. But when it's been 9 months of constant worry, having been through what had happened before, it's not just a massive change in life. The mindset is incredible because you've got this gorgeous newborn baby to look after, like everyone else would have done. But then you've also got crikey, that was an exhausting 9 months, wasn't it? To put it in flippant terms, you've got that to deal with. But then you've also got the thing that I'll elaborate on later, but this is what you could have had first time round, but the universe decided against you.
And that's grief, and that's anger, and that's a whole host of different emotions that I know you will talk about, that you were processing at the time as well.
The feeding her, the nappy changing, the lying with her on the settee, it was just what I'd always wanted. But there was that voice again, still saying, see, this is what was taken away from you. This is what the grief feels like. This is what you would have been feeling. So it's kind of, is it retrospective grief, where you couldn't process it first time round? Because you didn't know what it was. If you hadn't been our first child, then you'd know what you'd missed out on.
These are all the things you've been robbed of. Yes. You've been robbed of this, and now I am playing it out like a film of your life. These were the moments with Clara that you've been robbed of, and I'm only speaking, trying empathetically to put myself in your position, which would then taint what you had with your second daughter, because you can't experience it in that wonderful space of love and gratitude. because there's that voice in your head that's robbing you of the joy and the love, because there's a constant reminder. Absolutely. The asterisk, 100%. Yeah.
Is you can channel all your love, all your energy, everything that you would do into your newborn baby. And it's that but that was so hard. Because I love my daughter more than anything in this universe. But she wasn't my first.
And then the guilt that comes with the fact that that love feels almost blocked and not free flowing. You feel guilt, almost unfaithful to this beautiful relationship that you're developing with her, because there's the shadows of the past.
I already feel awful for having said that sentence just then.
Yeah.
I feel dreadful. I love her more than anything, but no parent should ever have to say that.
Yeah.
There is no what when it comes to loving my children.
But we are talking about parental grief and the death of a child. So I should imagine there is a space for parents who can say but, and they have been the ones that have been dealt the worst deck of cards. There can be a but you have had to have walked in some ugly shoes to have been able to say but.
Because I'm now sitting here thinking, if in 10 years' time she listens to this, what on earth is she going to think? It's like,
she's going to go, do you know what I think she might say? Wow, I've got an emotionally illiterate father. I've got somebody who is really, really brave. I have got a father who takes vulnerability as his strength. So let's reframe that one, because I would have given my right arm for a dad who could have articulated feelings and emotions. And let's not forget this, and I'm going to throw it into the mix. This is from a dad's point of view. We very often hear the stories of the loss of mums. So I think, and I'm going to speak on behalf of her in 10 years' time, it's with pride that she will listen to this. So take that one, Gareth, if you will.
Thank you. The thing I remember doing the most in those first few weeks and months was just sitting with my nose on the edge of her cot, just praying that her stomach wouldn't stop going up and down. To know that she was breathing and to know that she was okay, that's something that no parent should ever have to do. But I spent weeks and months sitting on the edge of her cot, just watching her, making sure she was okay. But yeah, by the time my paternity leave came to an end in January, I was completely lost. I'd got such waves of different emotions. I didn't know where to begin processing them. Do you process the happiness? Do you process the grief? Do you process the trauma? Where do you start with that? And just, I was transfixed on irrational fears. Like putting her in the bath petrified me. Why? No idea. But just little things, I can't explain them. That irrational fear of putting her in the bath or being outside the confines of my house with her, they petrified me. But again, I wasn't scared of being at work, but I'm not sure how helpful it was. Because again, channeling everything into Mr. Dale, but for completely different reasons, again, for what must have been the fourth or fifth different way of doing it in the space of 15 months.
And interesting, the Mr. Dale, those 4 or 5 versions of him weren't the same Mr. Dale, because the Mr. Dale who you channeled the first time is now not the same version of Mr. Dale. And I should imagine it's compounding the elements of Mr. Dale that's not doing the jobs he should be doing, because the word you used was lost. But I think I've got an identity, but it's only on reflection that that isn't even an identity as who I am. It's become too much and all consuming and all taking place in a work environment where there is no flex. Sarah, there's been a lot. I'm going to let Gareth just take a pause now and just have a breath. What are your thoughts at this stage? There's so much.
I don't even know where to start. I really don't. But I think the thing about identity is a really difficult one to unpick, but you can completely see it. And forgive me this reference because I am not being flippant, but it's almost Mr. Ben like, that each iteration of you has been a different character, and that's been your costume.
I made the Doctor from Doctor Who and a different regeneration.
Yeah, completely. And I think it's one of those things, isn't it, that life leaves you with a whole pile of unanswered questions and things that quite possibly you're never gonna resolve, you're never going to process, and we've used the word process loads in this, but actually sometimes there are things that we're never going to come to the point of understanding of how, why, should something have been done differently? Should I not have done that? Should I have not put the character on and gone in and pushed through? And Sharon and I firmly talk about this a lot. What happened in the past is what needed to happen at that point in time to get you through that situation or to that point where you are now. You can't sit in self-judgment and recrimination about things that have happened, and sometimes you do have to let it go. But I completely recognise what you're saying, the different iterations of Mr. Dale to get him through.
It must have been a coping mechanism. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, I'm sure a psychologist would be able to put a name on it or a theory or a construct around it, but I'm sure it's a very real thing. And the only way I can liken it, for me, is that I mask. My neurodivergence is such that, and it's only in the last couple of years that I've realised I've been doing it for nearly 5 decades, but I mask. I put a different version of the real me in different situations, and that is a coping strategy completely. So it must be.
It was quite a big, because at this point in my life I had no idea what was going on, but now X number of years later I look back on it and go, oh yeah, there was this Mr. Dale character and there was this Gareth character, and I can see it. And now I've learned, well, jumping ahead a few years to nowadays, I've embraced both of them. It took a while to identify them both, but once I did, I then started embracing both of them and going, Mr. Dale's this happy-go-lucky teacher in front of a bunch of children. Gareth's a bit of a nervous wreck because of everything that's gone on. What can I learn from both of them? But that's jumping ahead to the final stage of the story.
Thank you, Gareth, for sharing that so far. And I think that brings us to a natural end of part 1 of this story. Thanks for staying with us during another great episode of the Pit Pony podcast. And on behalf of myself, Sarah Dunwood, Mike Roberts at Making Digital Real, we wish you all the very best, and we'll see you soon. If you wish to contact me directly for a support session or a clarity call for your next steps, please find my link in the comments below. See you soon.